Well, good morning and welcome to episode 36. I do know the number of the Wisdom of the Soul presented by the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School. I'm Michael Benner, and I was just telling Melinda here before we started, the heater came on in the desert this morning, so uh, it is definitely autumn. We went from triple digits less than a month ago to cool temperatures overnight into the 50s. It's a real pleasure to be with you, and hope you're, now that you've recovered from your sugar high at Halloween, looking forward to the holidays of Thanksgiving and, did I say griving? Thanksgiving? That'll do. And Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's and solstice and Kwanzaa and I'm not sure what all is packed into the end of the year. It's really about solstice, isn't it? And so we've gone to standard time. The days are going to be much shorter as we move into the winter. And I guess, as I understand it, next spring, when we jump forward to daylight saving time again, at least most states, that'll be it. I think that's it. We're going to be in daylight time forevermore from that point on. We'll see. But I think that's the deal. Today's class is going to be really esoteric. I say that because it's a challenge for me to talk about today's topic, which is mindfulness and being. Being mindful, but being a being rather than a doing. So, because this is a difficult topic, I'm, what am I doing? I guess I'm appealing. I'm appealing to you for understanding. Um, we're going to talk on the level that few people ever talk. And yet, the challenge to me as a teacher is always to make this information accessible, to break it down in an easy, breezy kind of a way so that it's, accessible is a great word for it, so that it's a value to you and you can begin to practice. So if you read the newsletter this week, I riffed a little bit on the fact that we're called human beings. We're not called human doings. And that may sound a little silly and easy to dismiss, but think about how much of our lives are organized around doing. The never-ending to-do list. I don't know anybody that has a to-be list, right? Not Shakespeare, to be or not to be. What does it mean simply to be and not have to do quite so much? Now, there's a voice that rises up immediately and says, yeah, what are you talking about? I have so much to do that needs to be done. I've got to pay bills. Every month, I've got bills. Mortgage, rent, utilities, car payment, food, my God. And I've got to generate some sort of income if I'm going to pay those bills. And that usually means some form of employment and work and pleasing the boss, making sure I'm a valued worker. So how do I just put all of that down and be? Well, how about for 15 minutes at a time? It's not selfish, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not selfish at all to take 15 minutes of your day. What is that, 1% of a 24-hour day? Somebody do the math. An extremely small sliver of your day devoted to meditation on the idea of simply being. So we're going to do an opening meditation along those lines, and then we'll talk more about doing and being, and what are our options, and what does it mean to simply be, and moreover to shed the personality. Part of being is shedding the idea that you're a separate individual. When the meditation ends and you come back into your body, so to speak, and your sense of being an individual with a name and a place that you live, and in a world of separated objects and forms, it's okay to identify as the separated self, but you carry with you, nevertheless, a deeper understanding that you're much more than that you have always existed and that you will never die, that energy in consciousness, awareness, love is energy. It cannot be created nor destroyed. It's a simple law of physics, and it's a simple law of metaphysics. There is no beginning, and there is no end. And if there was a Big Bang, it wasn't the beginning of anything except maybe another chapter. That can be debated and pondered and reflected upon. But even then, that's a material world. That's a material universe. And we're talking about the energy, the consciousness, the awareness behind the veil. That is eternal and infinite, and that's who and what we are. So that's sort of the lines that we're going to move along today. It's wonderfully liberating concept. And again, even if you can only carve out a quarter of an hour once a day, that's a big deal. To devote 15 or 20 minutes to meditation every day. And it'll have a carryover effect, a wonderful contentment, a calmness, a tranquility that goes with it. So with that, let's do our meditation. Close your eyes. Get comfortable in your chair. Sit up, shoulders back. Feel balanced and centered. Take 2 or 3 nice, slow, deep breaths. Did I say close your eyes if you haven't already? Close your eyes and begin to take 3 or 4 nice, slow, deep breaths. Pulling in the good air as strength and power, and as you exhale, releasing the bad air like black, oily smoke. Blow it all out, beyond where you'd normally stop. Nice, slow, deep, connected breathing. Controlled from the abdomen, below the navel. Breathe from below the navel. And each time you exhale, feel a letting go feeling. Muscles relaxing and unwinding. Just relax. Put it all down. Take a risk if it feels new and uncomfortable, a little strange, even a little risky. Take a chance. And just let it go. Your worries and your doubts, your apprehension, your concerns about this and that. If you want them badly, you can have them later. You can revisit them after class. And as you allow your breathing to return to normal, take a few more moments to just feel yourself settling in. Think about a small lake or a pond. And as you watch the waves, the little wind waves or ripples on the surface of that pond, imagine them diminishing slowly. becoming less disturbed and more calm. The surface of the pond becomes less agitated, less disturbed, and more still. And you feel that in your body from head to toe, that peace, that tranquility, that contentment, even fulfillment. Not by doing, but by letting go of the need to do anything, but be present. To be present and aware in this eternal and infinite moment. Until the surface of that pond is as smooth as glass. And you sense that peace and tranquility. As if there's nothing you need to do and nothing that needs to be done. If only for 5 or 10 minutes. As if there's nowhere to go and no place you'd rather be. As if everything's okay, just fine. Perhaps absolutely perfect, just as it is, in this present moment, unfolding on its own. With no effort, identifying simply as the one who observes, the watcher, the witness, curious, even fascinated at the wonder of existence when we do nothing at all but watch. As a practice that carries over into our daily life and affairs. So that when something does need doing, you come from a balanced and centered place of equanimity, even-tempered, level-headed, balanced equanimity, as if everything is just fine as it is. Notice that nature never hurries, and yet everything gets done. Everything is accomplished naturally when we refuse to hurry or rush, when we dwell safe in the present moment. Imagine how it feels right now to practice feeling all alone but not lonely. As if there's no one else, and yet you feel whole and complete. You feel perfectly content and settled. But there's nothing outside of you that needs your attention. There's nothing beyond feeling whole in this present moment that needs to be done. Just imagine if everything were okay, just as it is. But moreover, there are no distractions, nothing demanding your attention. Just pretend. Exploring how that might feel. To know that everything has been accomplished that needs accomplishing. Everything is completed for now. Everything is just fine, quite perfect. And there's nothing to distract you, to cause you to turn your attention to the world. You simply feel as one, whole and complete. As if you are enough. Imagine feeling that you are enough. In fact, you're more than enough. You are all that is. Allow yourself to experience that wholeness and that sense of being settled. And everything's just fine. And gently turn your attention to your breathing. Identifying as the observer, the watcher, the witness. Bring your attention to the eternal presence of this moment. By simply observing the cycle of your breathing, in and out, around and around. No beginning, no end. Let peace and harmony reveal itself to you. For it need not be accomplished or attained. It sits quietly in the core of your being at all times. Absolute peace and tranquility, like the glass lake is always available to us. And feel the last of any holding on being released. The last of your grasping, the last of your rejection, letting go and sitting happily, joyously, and peacefully in the presence of all that is, the one life. For the sole purpose of being the awareness. First is being aware of the world around us and the world within us. Beyond that is being awareness itself. Learning to notice what you notice and to be aware of the world in the present moment without judgment leads to an understanding that we are awareness itself. Not only am I aware, I am awareness. And silently and internally, in your mind and your heart, simply say to yourself, I am. I am awareness. Being in the present moment. In joy and contentment. Which I am learning to carry into my waking life in a physical world of form and often chaos, conflict, and confusion. I bring this awareness of I am, awareness itself, to the conditions of the waking state. This is a practice. I am that. I am that I am. Let's finish this exercise by dwelling for a moment on self-compassion. You're familiar with the concept of developing compassion for others as you witness the suffering behind their often bad behavior. Turn that within and allow yourself to feel compassion for yourself and your efforts for the difficulties that you encounter in your waking life and affairs. Learn to love yourself for your willingness to understand yourself and the world, and to be better and better every day in every way, aspiring to grow from our animal nature, expanding to our spiritual nature, to embody those virtues, that wisdom, that love and longing for truth. Respect yourself for your willingness to want to learn more and understand more. Trust yourself as you read, as you think logically, as you examine your experiences in this life. Accept your goodness and your kindness. Your aspirations to help other people, to support them, to see yourself in them, and the one life everywhere. Though there is truth in the concept that divinity created this universe, there is a higher truth that divinity is this universe. Nothing is outside the one. Certainly not you. And so everything's okay. And you're unfolding and proceeding exactly as you should, right on schedule, with the greatest harmony when you stop trying so hard. And just be. Once in a while, just sit quietly and let everything be part of enough. My best is good enough. It's all I've got. But something in me is expanding and growing. My awareness, and I am that. I am that. I am aware of, and little by little, awareness itself. In the eternal moment. Bring this sense of wholeness and fulfillment and peace, loving kindness, compassion for yourself and others with you effortlessly back into the room. Count yourself out 1 to 3, first by simply forming the intention to return, Secondly, a kind of a rising up, as if waking up. And 3, eyes open, wide awake, back in the room. 3 is eyes open, feeling better than before, better and better. Wide awake, back in the room. Alrighty. Well, wasn't that nice? I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Mindfulness is easier to talk about than being. So let's start there with a simple definition of what mindfulness means. And then we'll talk a little more about being as opposed to doing. Again, I want to repeat, if briefly, and acknowledge that there's stuff that we do have to do. we have to live in the world, but we need not be of the world. And it's not unlike an actor. What did Shakespeare say? All the world is a stage, and we are but players with our entrances and our exits. And it occurs to me we're also the audience, and we own the theater, and we're the janitor that sweeps up afterward, and we're the producer, and we're the critic, and aren't we the critic, though? We play all these roles in this big psychodrama that is me and my life. And gosh, how much of what passes for conversation is wasted on this pity party of, I really want love and acceptance, but I'll settle for sympathy if I could just get you to pay attention to my suffering and how hard things are, and how hard I worked, and how unfair life is. And then let's put a name and a face on it. Let's begin to point fingers and accuse other people of being responsible for our unhappiness. It often occurs to me, I don't know that I've ever been dissuaded from this view, that the vast majority of what passes for politics, put air quotes around that, is just disgruntled human beings looking outside of themselves for an excuse to be disgruntled, for an excuse to be upset, for some reason why you're not happy. And it's like, well, I'm not willing to consider the possibility that I have anything to do with my unhappiness. Why would I make myself unhappy? That's crazy. I wouldn't do that, really. Are we sure? Are you sure that you're not the prime mover in your unhappiness, your anxiety, your frustrations and irritations? Are we that focused on the outer world that it's always this person or that group or some circumstance that is the reason why I'm not happy and joyous? Happiness for no reason, to me, is joy. That's what joy is. Where did we ever get the idea that we need a reason to be happy? Children don't believe that they need reasons to be happy. They're happy for no reason. So what happens in childhood? Where's the point or the zone? Seems like school has a lot to do with it, where we're socialized and educated and taught to be consumers and worker bees and cogs in a giant machine of production and consumption, earning and spending, destroying more than we're creating. Where did we learn we need a reason to be happy? I can't answer that because I think it's a million things. But I know it's not true. Generally speaking, emotions don't rise up for reasons. Sometimes you could, cast about and figure out a reason why you feel the way you feel, good, bad, or otherwise. In fact, few people have any approach to understanding their emotional feelings other than thinking about them. But as we discussed a couple of months ago in this class, when we talked about the difference between cognition and emotion, between thought and feeling, these are two distinct forms of intelligence. One very objective thought about the world around us, one very personal, very subjective. That's the emotional intelligence. Doesn't tell you much at all about the world, tells you about yourself. Your thoughts don't tell you very much about yourself. They're almost exclusively for understanding the world. Why are we not taught that? Seems simple enough. If there is a single basic distinction, and there are many, but if it boiled down to one basic entry point to understanding the difference between thoughts and feelings, that's it. Thoughts are objective, feelings, emotional feelings are, not only emotional feelings, physical feelings as well, for that matter, are subjective. And yet, by thinking about our feelings, we're using the wrong tool, the wrong instrument, the wrong intelligence. And what we end up doing is obsessing on the stimulus, obsessing on the person or the group or the event or the circumstance, the conditions that are arising, which caused, seemingly, that stimulated the feeling. So wouldn't my emotional upset, irritation, frustration, hurt, heartache, whatever, tell me about the cause out there that's coming at me and that I have to constantly defend myself against? And emotions are not for understanding the stimulus, they're for understanding the response. Emotions are a response. So all that work can be put aside. You don't have to do any of that. You don't have to understand why you feel the way you feel. You don't have to slice it and dice it and figure it out. I'm not sure people are telling us that, or I know it's not likely to just occur to you, or maybe to you, but certainly not most others. Again, happiness for no reason. How about anger for no reason? How about loneliness for no reason? How about apathy for no reason? They're just feelings that rise. It's like saying, what's the reason for the sunny day today and it's cloudy the next day and then it's sunny again? What's the reason for that? Well, we could launch into some discussion of weather and weather patterns and cold fronts and high pressure areas and low pressure areas, but really, is that really where you want to go when it comes to understanding or just experiencing the weather as it is? For no reason? Do you have to figure it out? Do you have to judge it? So mindfulness is sitting in the present moment, which is rich and full. There's nothing boring about the present moment. There are no boring moments. There are boring people, but there are no boring moments. You say, I'm bored, then change yourself, not the world. Everything is fascinating. Everything is wondrous. You want your life to be wonderful, full of wonder? Then wonder. I just brought up a song. You know that song? Wonder who wrote the Book of Love. I'm almost tempted to launch into a little song. To sit without judgment in the present moment. All right, so anytime I think about the past, if I'm practicing mindfulness, that's a distraction. Anytime I'm drawn to consider the future, that's a distraction. The only thing that's real is the eternity of the present moment as it unfolds. Wonder about that. Watch it unfold. Watch each moment passing. Every instant is fresh and new, don't you see? Every instant your life is born again. Why would you not be fascinated at the changes, at the newness, at the freshness, at your consideration, your realization that everything is in flux. Nothing is static but life itself. But within that, there's constant flux, constant change. The definition of the larger reality is that which is permanent, unchanging, and self-shining, radiant, perpetual creation, recreation, right? So the larger reality, the definition of philosophers, East, West, Middle East, from time out of mind, if it's real, it can't be changing, and it can't be impermanent. How could it be real if it's always changing, or if it doesn't last? If it has a beginning and has an end, it can't be real. You can argue that. You can think about that later. You can spend lots of time pondering that. I suggest you do. I'm not Moses giving you laws carved on stone tablets. I'm telling you about a consensus beyond organized religion. Let's call it a metaphysical consensus. So anything that is changing, that is impermanent, could not be real. So within this reality, there is all this conflict and all this change and this appearance of separation and individuality. The practice of mindfulness is so wonderful because it frees you from having to worry about that, from having to figure it out, from having to protect yourself and guard against it. I mean, practice of mindfulness will put you in touch with how much of your life to date is about fear, anxieties, and stresses, either solving problems or protecting you from harm, or at the very least gossip and worrying about what other people think and might be saying. And isn't it just so exhausting? Now you're a human doing. You're not being. You're not a human being. You don't have time to be. You're too busy trying to set everything right and protect yourself, to build walls, to plug the dike, to get the dust bunnies out from under the bed. Stuff we do have to do, but you don't have to be so stressed out about it as if, gosh, if only I could get to a place of accomplishment, if only I could attain some level of peace, I could relax and do these meditation. No, that's not. It's not the. It's just like mental chatter. You don't stop mental chatter in order to meditate. You meditate so as to let go of the mental chatter. Right? You don't have to attain all of the things that need to be done in order to practice simply being. You practice simply being to recognize that everything is already done. It's just fine as it is. And as you come out of your meditation again, I'm the first to acknowledge, yeah, you're going to have to cook the rice if you're going to eat the rice. And you got bills to pay and all of that. I understand that. It's like a concession to being in form. But it doesn't obviate, it doesn't eliminate the ultimate truth of who you are, an eternal being. To develop that awareness is to practice being mindful being. To be aware of what's unfolding before you in the present moment without judgment. And that's the other part. To do this without judgment. Let me make a quick pitch for the Q&A coming up in a few minutes. Last week I didn't realize it until I checked the chat box notes after the class. We had several questions that we didn't get a chance to address, and that's wonderful. This is a nice new problem that we're beginning to have. More questions than we can get to. So, yippee, man. I was stoked about that. And again, I think it's maybe easiest to handle the whole Q&A part of this class, the last half hour, if you'll just, as it pops into your head, just put in the chat box a nice, concise question or a comment. And then in a few minutes, we'll go to that. Melinda will read those. I'll comment. You'll have an opportunity to unmute your microphone and we can chat a little more about it. But I highly value the exchange, the engagement of the Q&A part of this class. So I know this stuff's deep and sometimes it's hard to even formulate a question, but everybody benefits. So, and it helps me find spaces that I've overlooked or failed to address. So that chat box, use that chat box even now as we approach the top of the hour. Judgment. Why judge? Again, how much of our judgment comes out of anxiety and worry and doubt and nervousness? I mean, don't you sometimes find yourself feeling like you don't belong here? Like you're some sort of invader? And you're in perpetual danger? And if it's not danger as our ancestors knew from living in the jungle, it's the danger of, well, what would people think if I wore this to work? What would people say if I wore this to church? What would people say if I grew my hair long because I feel like it? And why do we care? Isn't it possible to love them regardless? And if they're upset and trying to upset you, to recognize that they're suffering and have some compassion for their suffering and realize that that's life in form, is to suffer, to endure the conflict that we might learn from adversity. What are we learning? Most of us, I'm afraid, are learning just to hold on. And that requires that we judge things as basically, the basic judgments are what? Good or bad, right? Right or wrong. Winners and losers, good guys, bad guys. Are you with us or against us? Are you on the bus or are you staying behind? Are you ready to go? And it's very binary. And this is a byproduct of anxiety and stress. The more anxious, stressed, apprehensive, nervous, worried, whatever word you want to use, we are, the more binary we are in our thinking. So creativity is blown out of the water. No multiple choices. No more than one right answer. Remember in school we had tests, and sometimes if the multiple choice exam was really well written, they'd tell us, well, there's more than one right answer. You have to find the best right answer. Boy, that, to someone who's stressed or anxious or just a little bit nervous, that's just mind-blowing. What do you mean the best right answer? Some answers are more correct than others? Yeah. Well, I'm not comfortable in that kind of world. I'm more comfortable in a world where there are genders, two genders. There's a lot of controversy, social conflict around. I mean, there have always been people that felt fluid in their gender, that were aware of. Native Americans called it the twin spirit or the two-spirit people. It's not that much of a stretch to, if you're a man, to consider that you have a softer side and feminine energies, and vice versa, that a woman can be strong and independent and assertive and intelligent enough to, stand up for herself and defend herself and still be soft and gentle. Both of us, both genders, have access to all those energies. It's not that hard to understand that between black and white, there are not just shades of gray, there are rainbows of options and alternatives. We did a class a few weeks ago on the middle way, also known as the third way. That's where you begin to break apart this binary nonsense that comes out of fear. Hey, you're either with me or against me. It goes beyond gender. It goes to magnetic polarity. Everything is energy. Everything vibrates, so everything has a peak and a trough, a yin and a yang, an ebb and a flow, a full moon and a new moon. And it is like riding a bike. As your legs go up and down, back and forth, your feet go around and around. So always recognize in and out, back, even your breathing in and out is really round and round. See, it's cyclic. Everything cycles. Everything vibrates. That's where we get the sense of polarity, but don't ignore the middle. The permutations, the variations, the options. Now we're becoming less judgmental. Because instead of there's only two ways, and we disagree, and I know I'm right, so therefore you must be wrong, part of binary thinking is this belief that all differences are opposites. You do not want to live in a world in that self-imposed prison of believing that anything that's different is not only opposite, but if it's opposite, it's in opposition, it opposes you, it's out to get you, just because it's different. And then this leads to, well, there's only Republicans and Democrats. We only have two political parties. We only have two economic systems. Did you know that? Either monopoly capitalism or tyrannical communism. Nothing in the middle, right? Of course, there is a lot in the middle, but those who are anxious and fearful, attempting to expressing their human doingness rather than just being. They're coming out of so much fear and anxiety that they miss the middle. Constantly judging. Constantly judging. And don't you feel judged? Before we look at the extent to which we judge others and events and circumstances and conditions as good or bad or right or wrong, just take a look at how it feels to be judged. It's not fun, is it? I don't like being judged. Part of it's because I don't know what they're thinking. Well, do you need to? Why do you need to know what they're thinking? Why does it matter? Is it not a substitute for a failure to understand yourself? Does it not make sense that the more each of us understands ourselves, the less it matters what other people think? Know thyself. That's the Greek wisdom, the ancient Greek wisdom. Confucius, at about the same time, about 500 BC, said the same thing in China. So it's not solely Western. Confucius said it this way, one who knows others is wise, but one who knows himself or herself is enlightened. Good to know others, best to know yourself. Right? Same wisdom, East and West, from 2,500 years ago, and probably before that, but there was no written language, so nobody could write it down. So we peg a lot of these philosophies to that period around 500 BC, where people started writing stuff down, East and West. If you don't like how it feels to be judged, then why judge others? Why put them through that? Just love them as they are, forgive them, keep letting go, and be more concerned with yourself, your higher self, your true self, the human being, rather than the separated self, the individual who is always doing, and which is the cause of all of our problems. Do you know that? Are you aware of that? Can you remember my sense of being a separated self, an individual, which obviously has a sense of truth to it? There's a relative degree of truth about being this body, living in this body, living in this form, in a world of separated forms. That's relatively true, but it's not absolutely true. Like time itself is relatively true. We got a meeting on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock Pacific time. But time is an illusion. It's a convention. It's the distance between events. you know. So time is relatively true, but it's absolutely false. If there's only now. So we can acknowledge that, like Shakespeare said, we're players in a drama, that I've got a role to play as Michael Benner, acting out my thoughts and feelings, doing my best to get by, right? Trying to keep it together, trying to find more peace and love and understanding and justice in the world, trying to redeem it, to lift evil and fear and negativity and to love and harmony and that which is good and true and beautiful. I'm just saying there's something more, there's something much bigger. When we acknowledge the reality of the present moment, the non-reality of the past and the future, this eternal unfolding, the infinity and the eternal nature of now, we acknowledge that and stop judging everything. I say to myself, it's just the way I remember it. This may have value for you, it may not, but I like to remind myself, judging is for traffic lights. You know, that yellow, I call it an orange light. Everybody tells me it's yellow. I'm colorblind. That yellow light, do you step on the brake or do you step on the gas or do you just roll through it? Depends. You have to judge. Sometimes you have to judge. Rules are made to be broken. Even spiritual rules are made to be broken. You know, there's so much in Buddhist philosophy about refusing to desire, about the desire nature being the cause of all of our suffering. But if you desire not to desire, it gets so convoluted. Here you are desiring not to desire. So sometimes we just find ourselves in a hall of mirrors and everything seems a reflection and we can't find the primary source. The human being, not doing, being, just simply existing in the moment without judgment, free from judgment, learning to accept, which simply means acknowledge reality. If I'm being a little repetition on, let me spit it out, a little repetitious on this point, forgive me, but I think it's important. Acceptance is not the end of things. It's not surrender or giving up. Acceptance means to acknowledge the reality of the present moment. Now, if you want to leave it at that, or modify it, or change it, or heal it, or fix it, or improve it, fine, but you've got to accept and acknowledge the reality of it before you do any of that. To believe acceptance is giving up, throwing in the towel, that's it, I can't do anything about it. Who am I? Just one little person. Then you get really cynical and sarcastic. That's not what acceptance means. So mindfulness includes acceptance. This is the reality of where we are right now. Watch it. Watch it unfold. I know there's a lot of stress and anxiety about Tuesday in the primary elections. You'd be brain dead if you weren't concerned about the outcome. But I'm going to tell you right now, the outcome is going to be mixed. It's not going to be all one thing or another. Like everything, it will be mixed. There will be some wonderful things for you that come out of Tuesday, though it'll probably be Thursday before you know it. And some scary as hell things. So I'm tempted to say brace yourself, but I don't really want you to brace yourself. I want you to let go of the tendency to brace yourself and accept what comes. Again, nature doesn't hurry. Nature never hurries. Nature takes her time, and yet everything gets done. That's a nice place to leave it, I think. Everything gets done in nature in its own time. Okay, it's a few minutes after the top of the hour. Melinda, what do we got?
I don't see any questions. I'm going to give people a little minute. There was so much that you said in that half an hour. And if I could ask you a question about, well, it's all about real life, but it occurs to me that listening to you and doing the practice and then going out in the world and trying to integrate how complex it all becomes. For instance, looking at the holidays coming up and all the different needs and wants of all the different family members, and just trying to integrate the present moment and the acceptance with facing people's disappointment that things aren't all, everyone's not going to get their way, and me wanting to kind of mediate that, realizing I'm not sure how much that's my place, and maybe I'm just supposed to have my own example of the understanding of everyone's position. You know, there's it's very binary. There's like a win lose. If we do it this way, I win and you lose. You don't get what you want and I get what I want. And that's trying to integrate that reality into your talk.
Well, what comes up for me is sports, uh, team sports in particular, but gosh, even individual sports. Like the exception is golf, where you get a whole bunch of people out on the course and they're all on their own, but they're not really playing against each other. They're playing against themselves in the course. But games like tennis, for example, a one-on-one match of tennis, or team sports like baseball or football or soccer or whatever, um, you have opposition. You have two sides. You have two teams or two participants. And the idea is to create a winner or a loser. And if I remember my history and humanities classes, a lot of this came out of a desire to end war because people were so naturally competitive as a result of this, you know, worry about being eaten or killed in the jungle, a wild animal. So fear starts with that, survival in the jungle, surviving wild animals, and then it gets translated into war. And then some leaders a few thousand years ago thought, well, if we could create sport out of this, then maybe there'd be less death and suffering, and people would still enjoy the excitement and the adrenaline rush, not only as participants, but even as spectators. So this either or is an inherent part of everything in our lives, especially relationships, whether it's a husband and a wife, or parents and kids, or kids and their parents, or you and your neighbors, or coworkers, the boss that's such an absolute jerk, or people with abysmal politics and horrible values, this sense of opposition, of struggle. Everything is a struggle, everything is a fight. It's just not true. You don't have to buy into that. You can let it be. The difficulty, of course, is when you love someone and they love you, when you're invested in the relationship, like their relatives or your children or your in-laws or really dear friends or people from the club or whatever, then we have a stake in wanting them not to be upset with us. Ideally to be happy with us, but if we can't have that, at least don't hate me. Don't talk about me behind my back. And that investment, that need for things to be a certain way, again, that desire nature is at the root of all the problems. If we just accept the limits of our power, that's such a difficult thing to do. You know, the serenity prayer, everybody knows the serenity prayer. What is that last third part, that wisdom to know the difference between, the serenity to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, but then most importantly, the wisdom to know the difference between what I can change and what I have to accept. And accepting the limits of my power. Like, holidays are coming up. I'm feeling pulled in 18 different directions. There's no way I'm going to please everybody. And I'm tormented by my inability to please everyone. Own it. That's self-imposed. You can let go of that and let people be disappointed. And if it comes up as them pressuring you or threatening you, I don't mean overtly, but sort of a passive aggressive kind of a, yeah, okay, that's fine. You know, all that passive aggressive stuff goes, yeah, that's okay. Don't worry about me. We'll get by without you somehow. And meanwhile, they're like jabbing you with daggers. Uh, you just got to accept that you do the best you can, and that's all you can do. You have to let people suffer through, this is compassion, suffer through their suffering. How else can I say that? And again, be compassionate, be considerate. You can apologize. I'm sorry I can't be everywhere. Well, I'm sorry you don't understand. Well, I'm sorry you don't agree with me. You know, I was hoping that you might have some empathy for the difficulty this presents to me, but it's okay in any event. Everything's okay. It's fine. We're good. I love you. Let's do something else. I mean, they're not tormenting us without our permission. We have to give them permission to torment us. So it's ultimately self-imposed. Does that make sense? Melinda?
Yes, it does. It definitely does. Of course, everything is easier said than done, but I appreciate that frame of reference because I can go way into the other person's feelings and that's not helpful.
You know the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent?
Yeah,
Well, that's not just inferiority.
that's right.
No one can make you feel anything without your consent.
You know, there are a lot of people in the world, family members, people dear to us who aren't sitting here today and who I'm sorry to sound like this, don't have these immediate tools necessarily. And it's hard to watch them go through this anguish. It reminds me of that. Remember the Mel Brooks recording where he was visiting his kids in the cave? It was caveman days and it was raining and they were outside. Don't worry about it. We're fine in the rain. We don't need to come in. No, we're fine. It was it's kind of reminded me of that. No, no, don't worry about how we feel. We're not that wet. We're not that cold.
Yeah, total guilt tripping, right?
Right.
Well, again,
Not like we've done everything for you. Never mind that.
most of us are susceptible to being guilt tripped, but again, it can't happen without us buying into it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I refuse to feel guilty. Oop, I felt a little guilt there, little shame. I'm sorry. I'm not holding on to that because I just double checked and I'm doing everything humanly possible. Let me double down on that. Let me reflect on it. Let me do a 2-minute meditation on it. Yeah. There's nothing else that I can do to please you. I mean, look at the power that comes from being an unpleasable person. You can make people jump through hoops by standing on the verge of being pleasable but refusing to take that last step, to dwell around the threshold we talked about. And so here we torment ourselves trying to please a person that is determined not to ever be pleased. Because while unconsciously, really not aware of it, it's a power trip to go almost to you. You almost pleased me, but not quite. And so I'm going to guilt trip you and shame you and trigger all of your old traumas and feelings of inadequacy, fears of inadequacy, by being almost pleasable, but not quite. I'm just gonna. Does this make sense? Do you recognize this?
Yes, yes, I do. I'll leave the name out, but yes, I'm sure people have seen that there. Yep.
I remember doing a talk show on KRLA around 2005, 2006. I've done radio for 54 years, and yet there are a few calls that stick out
Mm.
of the thousands and thousands of phone calls I took on these talk shows. And one was this KRLA program where a woman called expressing her deep sadness and frustration at her inability to please either her mother or her daughter. I forget which it was. And I listened to her for a few minutes and I said, has it ever occurred to you that this person, again, I think it was her daughter or mother, I'm not sure which, is just unpleasable? And there was dead silence, just stony silence. And it's like deer in the headlight kind of silence. And you could almost feel her going back and forth inside her head. And usually dead air is a bad thing on the radio. You don't want silence to,
Mhm.
People tune out. But in this case, I let it go.
Mm.
Because I could feel people moving closer to the radio. Just, what is she going to say? And, of course, finally she spoke, but she just babbled. She could barely comprehend the concept that all of her life she had been allowing herself to be manipulated by somebody who acted pleased, but only to a point. And then at the end, like Lucy pulling the football away, right?
It's always just one more thing that you didn't anticipate and you didn't do it right.
Right. And it's your fault.
Oh yeah. And you
Right.
could have never seen it coming, and it was not even a real thing, but yes, it was. It was who you are will never please me.
See, this speaks to the bigger, more holistic version of all of this, is that all of this suffering comes from a failure to understand ourselves. And yet, the greatest fear in the world is to understand yourself. So, part of the reason we're so easily tempted to be drawn into a world of conflict and conflagration is it's a great distraction from the terror of exploring the truth of who I really am. And only when we gather the courage, or what my book is called, as you know, Fearless Intelligence, as you fearlessly approach your thoughts and feelings and wish to understand yourself and substitute that from our obsession on figuring out other people, that we begin only then to free ourselves from all of this torment. And yet it's a firewalk that few people are willing to go through. It's just so terrifying. It's like, well, what if I discover my parents were right and I really am bad? Even the church is telling me I'm a sinner. I'm rotten. I'm going to hell if I don't obey their conditions for entry into heaven, right?
Mm.
So your parents tell you you're bad and they punish you and they're never pleased. There's always one more little thing. And then God is unhappy. He or she is never pleased. He's angry about this and hates you for that. And all of this Old Testament brimstone and sulfur, fire,
Yep.
anger and hostility. everywhere you turn.
Mhm.
You're not good enough. You're not enough. And we attempt to prove we're enough by trying to get accepted by other people rather than learning to accept ourselves. Accept what about ourselves? You won't know until we practice closing our eyes, looking within, and asking, what do I feel? And what can I learn about myself from the way I feel? Forget what you think about yourself. We're not what others think about us. We're not what we think of ourselves. We are what we care about. We are what we love. We are that love. Not as an emotion. Love as consciousness, as awareness itself. To be aware of being aware. And then to be aware that you are awareness. And that's your job, is to watch and be aware of what? You. And then you discover you're not this separated individual other than all of these other separated individuals. You are the one thing. Oh my God, I am not the object, I'm the subject. You know, part of the difficulty of understanding this Eastern philosophy, this monism, this non-dual sense of existence, this wholeness in monism, is that we look at what it would be like to be the one from the perspective of the separated individual. Just like a sentence has a subject and a verb and an object. We see ourselves as an object looking at divinity as a subject. Instead, we need to identify ourselves as the subject. And my individuality and form is an object. And all of these other objects are functions of the subject, which is oneness, which is wholeness. Be the subject, be the one looking out. And that's this tranquil, mindful sense of being, as if there's nothing that needs to be accomplished, as if everything is okay, and that which needs to change unfolds on its own, even though when you open your eyes and come back into this world, it's like, wait a minute, I've got stuff to do. That's a concession to living in form, but it doesn't deny the reality of being whole, being the one life in the present moment. There's only one of us here, and it's you and you and you and you and you.
And how do we get to really internalize that as opposed to having it be an intellectual concept? I guess it's through the practice of the mindful breathing and the meditation, because I can't think my way into really believing that on an organic level.
Exactly. You allow yourself emotionally to be swept away. You allow your emotions to have their way with you as if you are immune to damage, as if you cannot be injured, you cannot be eliminated. You have no beginning, you have no end, there is no death. So what's an emotion going to do to you? Let it in. Let it have its way with you. Every single emotion. We have no problem with the positive, warm, fuzzy emotions. Let those in. Well, let your fear in. Let your anger display itself. The sooner you're aware of it, the easier that is to do. You know, you say, well, let my anger have my way with me. I'd be smashing things and throwing things and strangling people or shooting them. No. The more sensitive, the more aware you are of the feeling, the sooner you feel it, you can say, it's like seeing anger way out on the horizon, or see your hatred beginning to build and say, wow, what is this? Attend to it as soon as possible. And it's so much easier to manage hurtful feelings when they first present themselves. We wait too long. Again, using the mind to obsess on the stimulus, whoever made me feel this way. I'm only angry because Joe Blow made me angry. I'm only upset because Sally Jones upset me. And we obsess on them. That's that's where we make the horrible mistake. Forget all of that. Turn within, let the feeling come upon you. Let it have its way with you. Let it reveal itself to you. It's only a symptom, just like you're a medical doctor. You know symptoms are not causes, they're responses, they're effects, they're wonderful cues. And similarly, the lights and gauges on the dashboard of your car that are designed to indicate a problem, they're not the problem. They're just an indicator. They're a symptom. You don't fix the dashboard. You look under the hood. So it is with our anger and our hatred and our jealousy and envy and our frustration and our fears. And these are just symptoms. Use them to understand yourself and be free of all of that. You see? And nobody can touch you. Then you're happy for no reason. You're happy every morning when you wake up to have another day to exist, to enjoy the beauty of this life, and to develop our compassion for those who continue to suffer and support them by offering them whatever we can. But know that, we can't just go around healing people. You can't fix them in most cases. You can teach, you can offer, provided they're willing, but gosh, don't we all know, haven't we tried? Every one of us tried and tried to fix our relationship, as if we could just explain to the other person, if we could just make them understand. Look, they have their karma. They have to go through what they have to go through. And so do what you can, but in the end, you go to compassion. And that compassion for their suffering opens your heart and makes you more. Every broken heart you have opens your heart. Every bit of sadness and depression opens your heart so you carry more love, can be more loving, more understanding, have more to offer others, and live a more peaceful life. It's not that we should avoid suffering. It's that we suffer well and elegantly. And what did I put in the newsletter this week? The quotation was, I can only paraphrase now, about the second level of pain that we put on ourselves. There is the pain of pain. But then there's the pain of what we make of it. You see, the torment that we put ourselves through. So the saying in Eastern philosophy is, pain is mandatory, suffering is optional. Feel the pain, accept it, let it in. It's trying to communicate to you. It's trying to tell you something. There's a wonderful line in a poem by Rainer Maria Rilke that says, again, I have to paraphrase, perhaps everything inside you that hurts or frightens you. How does it go? Perhaps everything inside you that hurts is a part of you that is afraid and needs love. And that's how I look at it. Everything that hurts me, everything that frightens me, everything that depresses me and makes me sad is temporary, but also an opportunity to learn something about myself from that feeling simply by watching it, not by reasoning, not by thinking. Just watch it the way you would watch a cloud. You see? There's so much more to be learned from emotional intelligence about yourself. Mental intelligence, again, very good for understanding the world. Wonderful, wonderful for understanding everything around us. But what you think of yourself, that and $5 would get you a coffee at Starbucks. Anybody come up with a comment or a question before we close out?
Anybody? There's a lot there. Don't see anybody so far, Michael.
Did you see the questions that we missed last week?
I did not. I thought there was one at the end that we squeezed in, but I missed the rest of them. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering.
I did not. I kept, and of course, I do keep looking. I keep that chat button open.
Good. Okay.
Yes, and then sometimes people just put their hands up, but that's pretty clear too.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, then let that be. Thank you for our exchange and interchange. I think it's very valuable to hear two people talking about it, not only me lecturing. So
Well,
thank
it's
you
hard
for
to
that.
bring some of these concepts into real life, and you are a good transition. I think that's one of the things that's so valuable about your approach is that you live in the real world. You have your share of problems, you know people that do, and yet you as they say, you walk your talk.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. Often inelegantly, perhaps, but what choice do you have? I tried denial; it didn't work. I tried judging others and managing others; that did not work.
Escapism doesn't work either, but boy, it's sure tempting sometimes.
What's that?
Escapism is sure tempting sometimes, but that doesn't. But there, that's that saying, wherever I go, there I am. Darn it, sometimes.
I still didn't get the ism.
It's like wherever escapism.
Oh,
Wherever I go,
escapism.
wherever I
Yeah,
go, there I am. But that's my alternative.
yeah, escapism. I didn't. That's. I get it now. Great. Thank you, Melinda. Thanks, everybody. If you guys would unmute and say so long to each other, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Remember to you must have set your clocks back. You're here. And have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next Sunday. Namaste, aloha, and salam.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye,
you, guys.
everybody. Remember to vote.
Oh, yes. Vote, vote, vote. Thank you for that.